On this Thursday night, a tragedy at sea. A fatal Canadian military helicopter crash off the coast of Greece. Tributes to the dead and missing.
All of them are heroes.
The complicated search and the mission they were on. Global News investigation. New red flags raised about how China rounded up tons of personal protective equipment. The drug showing promise to treat COVID-19, what it does and why it's not a cure. And a momentous day for a magnificent man.
Happy birthday to you.
The world celebrates Captain Tom Moore.
Your heroic efforts have lifted the spirits of the entire nation.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin with what we know about the crash of a Canadian military helicopter off the coast of Greece. The families of 6 Canadians got the terrible news today. That helicopter went down while on a training mission. 1 person is confirmed dead. The search is continuing for 5 others. They are Sub-Lieutenant Matthew Pike, a naval weapons officer from Nova Scotia. Captain Brendan Ian MacDonald, a pilot also from Nova Scotia. Captain Kevin Hagan from BC, also a pilot. Air Combat Systems Officer Captain Maxime Miron-Morin from Quebec, and Master Corporal Matthew Cousins, an airborne electronic sensor operator from Ontario. And Sub-Lieutenant Abbigail Cowbrough is confirmed to have died. The 23-year-old from Nova Scotia was a member of the Royal Canadian Navy. Her father said in a Facebook post he is shattered, knowing we won't have this smile in our lives anymore. She loved her job, her life, and most of all, her friends and family. It is not clear what happened. The military says the helicopter went down in the Ionian Sea yesterday as it was returning to HMCS Fredericton. The flight data and voice recorders have been recovered, and an intense search is underway for the missing. All of this has added another layer of agony to Nova Scotia. Ross Lord is in Halifax with our top story tonight.
Friends and family say Abbigail Cowbrough was a credit to her community and her country. Better known as Abby, she was a young Navy sailor and accomplished 23-year-old musician, active in her Nova Scotia church.
She was excellent on the bagpipes, compassionate in everything she did.
Last week, Sub-Lieutenant Cowbrough performed a musical tribute on board HMCS Fredericton, honoring the 22 victims of the Nova Scotia mass shooting.
She did that from the forecastle of the Fredericton while deployed for everybody in Nova Scotia. And here we are only 2 short days later paying that tribute back to her. It just doesn't seem right.
There were 5 other people on the Cyclone helicopter that crashed off the coast of Greece.
Each of them will leave a void that cannot be filled. On behalf of all Canadians, I want to offer my deepest support to their families, their friends, their shipmates, and their fellow CAF members. This is another very hard day for Halifax, for Nova Scotia, and for our armed forces families.
The chopper, with the military call sign Stalker, was returning to HMCS Fredericton during a training exercise before sundown.
At approximately 6:52 p.m., the ship lost contact with the aircrew, and a few minutes later, flares were spotted in the water.
The military calls the crash an accident.
We remain in contact with Italy, Greece, the United States, and Turkey, who are assisting us in the search and rescue efforts to help us find the Canadian Armed Forces members who are on the helicopter.
Water temperatures in the search area are much warmer than they are here in the North Atlantic, but a pilot who's flown military choppers in the Mediterranean says there are other complications.
The Ionian Basin is the deepest portion of the Mediterranean, which can pose a problem if the aircraft has gone to the bottom. Is going to be an issue with locating where the wreckage is, and also perhaps any recovery attempts are going to be hampered by the depth.
The entire fleet of cyclones on the east and west coast has been placed on an operational pause, which means the choppers will not fly anywhere until the military rules out any fleet-wide problem. Ross Lord, Global News, Halifax.
The Sikorsky Cyclone helicopter has been in use by the Canadian Armed Forces since 2018. It replaced the 50-year-old Sea Kings. The Cyclones were originally ordered in 2004, but the multi-billion-dollar program was plagued by years of delays and cost overruns. They have been deployed on 5 overseas missions with the Navy and used for surveillance, search and rescue, and tactical transport for operations supporting national and international security efforts. They are praised for their state-of-the-art technology.
I don't have any concerns about the helicopter. It's performed terrifically. It's got 9,000 hours on the fleet. We've had one other incident, which was a hard landing a little while ago, but that was because of a very unusual gust of wind that knocked the helicopter around.
The helicopter and HMCS Fredericton were halfway through a 6-month deployment to help NATO keep Russia from interfering with European security. As military families grieve, members of the armed forces are doing critical work, keeping people in long-term care homes alive. More teams of soldiers are being deployed to Quebec nursing homes. The expanded operation means soldiers will be helping in up to 20 Quebec care homes within the next few weeks. Quebec first asked for military help in 5 overwhelmed facilities earlier this month. The virus, though, kept spreading, and the crisis is now much worse. The province says 280 care homes are now dealing with outbreaks, and 4,400 residents are confirmed to be infected. One of the hardest hit facilities in Quebec is the St. Dorothée Public Long-Term Care Home in Laval. At least 193 residents there have tested positive for the virus. That's more than 80% of the people who live there, and 88 of them have died. Here's a snapshot of the situation across Canada today. More than 1,600 new cases have been confirmed, and the virus has now officially reached all corners of the country. Nunavut confirmed its first case today. New Brunswick had another day, the 12th, with no new cases. A number of other provinces also reported no new infections. The bulk of the new cases are still concentrated in Quebec and Ontario. And Ontario had a bad day today. It recorded the highest daily death toll, 86 people in the last 24 hours. Premier Doug Ford says the curve, though, is flattening, and he says he's feeling more optimistic about reopening the economy.
There's a light at the end of the tunnel. And I am laser focused right now on opening things up as quickly as we can in a safe and measured way.
Ford has not set any specific dates for reopening, though, but his government did release more guidance today for how businesses can safely get going. It includes recommendations like installing plexiglass and putting markers on the ground to encourage physical distancing. Until those things happen, many businesses keep struggling and bills are piling up. Rent is due tomorrow. Some say they can't afford to pay. The federal government rolled out a new commercial rent relief program last week. It's supposed to lower rent by 75% for those that qualify, but the organization representing small businesses says not everyone will. They conducted a survey of businesses that reported needing help with rent. 38% said they do not qualify for the program. Of those that do, 9% said their landlords won't participate, so they won't get any relief. Mike Drolet has more on the frustrations as rent day arrives.
In Almonte, Ontario, when Equator Coffee closed its doors for physical distancing, they opened their eyes to a new business model.
We got a new website up and running.
Owner Amber Hall had to adapt, but not enough revenue is coming in to pay the bills. And with 2 Equator locations in Ottawa closed down, she saw the Rental Assistance Program, or CERCA, as a way to save her business. Her 2 Ottawa landlords ultimately agreed to share in the economic pain, but in Almonte, she's a landlord as well. And when only one of those businesses qualified for the program, she had a decision to make.
But the one that's dropped 50 to 60%, it's not going to help them. So thankfully, we were able to give them relief anyhow, but not through that program.
It's the details of that program that are causing headaches for Mark Tardif in Courtenay, BC. He hasn't sold much furniture of late, and he's paying rent from his savings. CERCA could be what saves him, in theory, if his landlord agrees. But in practice, the program won't be up and running until mid-May.
I'm really hopeful, but I haven't had a good indication yet from them. They're not They want to see the fine print, and I don't blame them. And I mean, they're a business too.
I think reasonable people should be working this out in a reasonable way. But as a landlord, you can appreciate that if you've got bills to pay, you may not be able to afford to extend 75% to your tenant.
And many haven't. Small Business in Crisis.ca has been unofficially tracking closures. Every province has been affected, but it's when you zoom in on Vancouver and then in Ontario and ultimately the Golden Horseshoe that you can see how many businesses are in peril. The federal government is bullish on CERCA making a difference. It will evolve, they say, but it will take time and cooperation.
And I would encourage Canadian landlords to also act in a responsible way, in a way which is supporting fellow Canadians.
Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
Some new numbers are out on what the pandemic is doing to the federal deficit. The PBO, the Parliamentary Budget Watchdog, estimates the deficit will soar to almost $25 billion this fiscal year and then could skyrocket to $252.1 billion the next year. That would be the largest budgetary deficit since the mid-60s. The numbers could climb higher depending on how long emergency public health measures remain in place. The PBO estimates real GDP will shrink by 12% this year, pushing the federal debt to GDP ratio to 48.4%. It predicts once the federal emergency assistance measures end and the economy hopefully recovers, that ratio should stabilize. Well, before most Canadians knew anything about a shortage in personal protective equipment, a Global News investigation has found an operation was underway to gather up as much as possible and send it to China. In mid-January, Chinese consulates in Canada and around the world put out a call to Chinese nationals to help build a stockpile, at the same time as China was downplaying the seriousness of the virus. Abbigail Beeman explains.
Every overseas Chinese is a warrior, reads this state media report from early February, saying Chinese nationals across the world raced against time to send back batches of scarce supplies for the motherland. It was mid-January when China put out an urgent call for help for themselves while hiding the severity of the new coronavirus that would hit the rest of the world.
It's a machine for charm offensives, but it is also, it's fundamentally a political warfare operation.
Author and journalist Jonathan Manthorpe is talking about the United Front Work Department, a powerful Chinese government agency used to influence Chinese immigrants worldwide. In just 6 weeks, China gathered 2.5 billion pieces of personal protective equipment, including from Canada, where they used consulates, state-owned businesses, and United Front community associations to send back at least 100 tons, according to Chinese reports. A 2018 CSIS report says the United Front has frequently been a means of facilitating espionage, and CSIS and RCMP sources tell Global News some of the community organizations reportedly involved appear to have members previously monitored or investigated by Canadian officials.
To me, it is utterly unconscionable that here are Canadians who are being intimidated and pressured in their own country by foreign agents.
That's when I learned that some PPE suppliers told the federal government in late January that China was trying to corner the global PPE market.
Conservative MP Aaron O'Toole says the federal government knew early but didn't act. Neither Health Canada nor the Prime Minister would directly answer questions from Global News about China's actions.
Our intelligence services were tracking and aware of the issues, and we got regular updates through the month of January. Further than that, I don't have anything to add.
O'Toole is calling for 2 inquiries, one about Ottawa's handling, the other a wider assessment with help from Five Eyes allies.
So it's up to the free world to hold China and global bodies to account.
A United Front report from March pushes back, saying groups are now donating PPE to other countries and to Chinese nationals overseas. Chinese consulates and community organizations did not respond to Global News questions. Abbigail Beeman, Global News, Ottawa.
In the American state of Michigan, hundreds of people, some carrying guns, are protesting the state of emergency in place there because of COVID-19.
This is about each and every one of you patriots.
They marched on the state capitol building as lawmakers debated extending emergency measures. Some of them forced their way in, yelling at senators on the floor below to reopen businesses and end the stay-at-home orders. An experimental antiviral drug, originally tested as a treatment for Ebola and other coronaviruses like SARS, is being fast-tracked by the U.S. It's called remdesivir. It's not a cure and it won't prevent infection, but small clinical trials have shown it can help some patients. Jackson Proskow explains what it is and why it might be the best hope right now.
A potential treatment for the sickest of the sick, the experimental drug remdesivir may be effective in helping COVID-19 patients recover faster.
It got real for me when I laid down Sunday night and couldn't breathe.
29-year-old Drew McDonald was seriously ill when he was given the treatment as part of a clinical trial.
By the time I left the hospital, I was already improving drastically.
The initial results in patients around the world are similar. On average, patients recovered in 11 days compared to 15 days for those given the placebo. The death rate in patients given the drug was 8% compared to 11% for those who weren't.
This is not the total answer by any means, but it's a very important first step.
The drug was originally developed to treat Ebola. Researchers at the University of Alberta discovered it could also work on COVID-19.
We have shown that remdesivir inhibits this engine of the virus, and it works in essence in such a way that the engine needs gas, but with remdesivir it actually gets diesel.
But there are strong caveats. It is not a vaccine, and it won't stop coronavirus from spreading person to person. Right now, the treatment is only for patients who are seriously ill.
It's not a game changer, but it is a potential treatment. So a very important proof of concept.
Several Canadian hospitals, including Toronto's Sunnybrook, are now part of ongoing studies into remdesivir. In the fight against COVID-19, the drug is offering a rare glimmer of hope. Jackson Proskow, Global News, Washington.
Fort McMurray's fight to stop floodwaters. Coming up, how people are joining forces to save their community. There's some good news tonight for residents in Fort McMurray, Alberta. An ice jam on the Athabasca River there that was contributing to all the flooding has shrunk to about half its original size. More than 1,200 structures, though, have been damaged by all the flooding, and it could be a week or more before the nearly 13,000 people forced out can go back. Dallas Flexhog is in Fort McMurray tonight, where people are working together through the worst. Dallas?
This is being called a once-in-a-century flood, and with the chance for more flooding, the city can't even begin to think about recovering yet. Many are stepping up to help out in any way they can. Historical buildings downtown were saved from floodwater because volunteers stacked up thousands of sandbags to save them. The same group is handing out food now to the volunteers still on the ground. And with the city's food bank underwater, this makeshift car wash bay has turned into a pickup location. Many of the volunteers handing out essential food and supplies are evacuees themselves.
I've not heard one person say, I'm giving up. I've heard everybody says we're tired, but I've not heard one person say we're giving up. Fort Mac is going to fight on. It's going to stay strong.
It's hard to feel happy about it, but there's always a little bit of bright side to everything. You know, when you see the community come together like this and help one another out, it makes you feel good to say that you come from Fort McMurray.
Fort McMurray Mayor Don Scott was asked if he hates being mayor right now through this, and he said no. He couldn't be prouder at watching everyone double down on hope. Donna?
All right, Dallas Flexhog in Fort McMurray. Thanks. Still ahead, Russia under pressure as the Prime Minister tests positive. The man who is tasked with leading the response to COVID-19 in Russia is now sick himself. Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin tested positive on the same day. Russia had a record spike in new cases, more than 7,000 today. That brings the total confirmed cases to 106,000. President Vladimir Putin has warned Russia is entering the most intense stage of the pandemic, and health workers are reporting shortages of protective gear. Next, wishing Captain Tom Moore a happy 100th. He did it. Captain Tom Moore turned 100 today, and the whole world is sending him best wishes. He's received about 120,000 cards, including a special one from the Queen, who is just 6 years behind him. She congratulates him for raising more than £30 million for Britain's National Health Service by walking laps in his garden. Crystal Gamansing on the celebration he never expected.
Happy birthday to you.
Captain Tom Moore is a UK treasure. Without handshakes or hugs, expressions of admiration for the Second World War veteran took all forms: artistic, grand, and heartfelt.
There is a letter here that conveys your appointment to become the Honorary Colonel of our Army Foundation College up in Harrogate.
That really is one of the greatest honours anybody could get.
Even with his new title, he says he's still Captain Tom, something all of the mural artists will be glad to hear. He even has the attention of the royal family.
He's a one-man fundraising machine, and God knows what the final total will be, but good on him. I hope he keeps going.
It's not just that he has managed to become the largest single fundraiser for the National Health Service, or that he is the oldest person to have a #1 hit in the UK.
Hold your head up high.
By walking 100 laps in his backyard before his birthday, he's inspired people.
Your heroic efforts have lifted the spirits of the entire nation.
As a tribute to the 100-year-old, a birthday flyover.
I'm so overwhelmed by these honours that I'm getting today, really am.
Praise, presence, and gratitude for those who walk into our lives, even if they are standing 2 meters away. Crystal Gamansing, Global News, London.
And that is Global National for this Thursday. I'm Donna Friesen. We leave you tonight with gratitude and condolences for the families of those killed and missing in that military helicopter crash off the coast of Greece.
Here at home, we turn to the forces in times of flood, fire, or other natural disasters. They never say no. They always put their shoulders to the wheel. The women and men of the Canadian Armed Forces are the hand of our intentions, the concrete expression of our valor and values as Canadians. And so we stand with them, and we hold out hope to find the missing.